Welcome to your all-active Reserve and Veterans TV series. Welcome once again to Vets Visits on TV. And this is program number 117 for the month of December 06. And we're happy to be with you. This is my co-host.
I'm Brad Lindsay, Olmsted County Veteran Services.
And I'm Jerry Barnhart, the founder and producer of the program. This is an abbreviated edition because we'll only have one feature, and Brad's going to introduce that to you in a few moments. First of all, let's go the dates in history. For December, we celebrate 3 special holidays for a large number of persons in the United States. For Christians, it's Christmas, of course, December 25th. For practicing Hebrews, it's Hanukkah, the Festival of the Lights. And for those of African descent, Kwanzaa. And I hope I pronounced that right. So, in the history of the United States, December 7th is a most important date. And in our 10 years of Vets Visits on TV, this is the 3rd time that we devoted an entire show to this World War II theme. Brad, will you introduce this feature, please?
In 1989, Jerry was first given permission by the copyright holder to show excerpts of this hour-long VHS program, with important events leading to the bombing of Pearl Harbor by Japan, the European War, the atomic bombs, and post-World War II. Please do invite others to watch future airings on your cable system during this month.
At the conclusion, we'll share how you can obtain the full VHS tape that you just saw a moment ago. Also, to viewers in our 19 non-Minnesota states of the network, we invite you to please watch the warning about the continuance or discontinuance of this series in your community. Now to this abbreviated history of World War II and the Pearl Harbor Memorial.
For everything there is an appointed time. And there is a time for every purpose under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to laugh and a time to weep. A time for peace and a time for war. A half-century has little dampened the allure of Pearl Harbor. The events that occurred here are etched into our national consciousness as deeply as the names are chiseled on the Wall of Honor. The sunken battleship lies awash in contradictions, emoting both strength and weakness. The powerful image of the once formidable USS Arizona, now naked and exposed, reveals the vulnerability of mortals and of nations. She was silenced before her massive guns could sound in fury. Yet the repercussions from the torment once heard above and below her decks reverberates louder and longer than any explosion could.
What took place that morning, I'll never forget that. It will never be erased from my mind.
It's one of those days that very few of us can ever forget.
A date which will live in infamy.
Even if the physical remains of the battleship are obscured by sunlight reflecting on the waves, the realization that something of grave consequence occurred here is seen in the somber faces of visitors. For under the murky waters of Pearl Harbor lies a sleeping giant, once the pride of the fleet, now reduced to the final resting place for those brave sailors and Marines unable to flee her fiery bowels. On the far side of the world, Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini had forged a fateful alliance that engulfed Europe in war. The Third Reich was changing the face of Europe. In 1938, German troops goose-stepped through the streets of Prague. In the spring of that year, another troubling episode stoked the fires of war. Germany and Russia signed a non-aggression pact. Hitler's Legion shocked the world with their blitzkrieg attack on Poland. France and Great Britain declared war on Germany, but by June 1940, troops of the Third Reich entered Paris, and the British suffered a humiliating retreat at Dunkirk. Although England, France, and Belgium were waging a mammoth battle against the Nazis and their Axis partner Italy, it was a dark hour for the Allied cause. The United States tottered on the edge of neutrality, but its emotion and not too well disguised material support went to the Allies.
We lived happy out there. We just hardly thought about it because we thought we were so far away from it that possibly we weren't going to be involved. And of course, Roosevelt kept maintaining the position that we will remain neutral.
This nation will remain a neutral nation. But I cannot ask that every American remain neutral in thought as well.
The winds from the Far East blew just as foul. Japan's overpopulation and the need for natural resources had led to a militarism that was perceived as a direct threat to American interests.
My father was very, very knowledgeable of Japan. He had spent 7 months in a Japanese hospital. He'd been wounded in the Boxer Rebellion in 1900 fighting the Chinese, and he'd spent his recovery time in Japan, so he had kept up with the Japanese. And in April of 1940, he testified before the Congress that if the present trends of oil embargoes and steel embargoes continued, that the Japanese, being heavily involved in Manchuria already, that war with Japan was inevitable. So we were very much aware.
Since her stunning defeat of Russia in 1905, Japan emerged as a military power. After siding with the victorious Allies in World War I, her territorial gains included the Marshalls, the Carolinas, and the Marianas. Japan incurred the ire of the League of Nations by invading Manchuria. In short order, the Japanese created a new country, Manchukuo. The formidable Japanese empire expanded into China and Southeast Asia. The raw materials exported from these colonies fueled Japan's militaristic appetite. In 1940, the United States distanced itself from Japan. The U.S. renounced commercial treaties and curtailed supplies of oil and scrap metal, crucial ingredients for the Japanese war machine. Japan sided with the Rome-Berlin Axis and on September 7, 1940, signed the Tripartite Pact, pledging to assist each other by all political, economic, and military means. On July 2, 1941, Japan invaded Indochina, seizing it from the Vichy French regime. Here was the golden chance to expand her empire while the nations of Europe were at war. The attack on Pearl Harbor was conceived by Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet.
Tactically, it was a tremendous tactical win, if you want to call it that way. In a strategic sense, it did not accomplish what they wanted. They wanted to destroy that fleet, so they couldn't go out and relieve the Philippines.
As you know, this was very carefully planned by the Japanese. It was a full moon, first weekend after payday, and they took full advantage of us. December the 7th, we were on weekend half-staff, very minimum.
The thing is that it was a beautiful plan.
And years later, I talked to Commander Fushida, who led the air attack, and he told me that he was very surprised how quickly he came under fire. And in his book, he mentions how quickly he came under fire. So the fleet really wasn't asleep. It probably took less than 1 or 2 minutes maximum for every ship to get firing. So the length of surprise was really tactically, again, as opposed to strategically, it was only 1 or 2 minutes.
Japanese war planners concentrated on a surprise attack on the American fleet, but were stymied by one technical aspect. Torpedoes, the key ingredient for success, were designed to work at a depth of 75 feet. Pearl Harbor was about 40 feet deep. Unwittingly, the Fleet Air Arm of the British Royal Navy helped Japanese planning. On November 12, 1940, barely a year before Pearl Harbor, a daring raid by 21 aircraft from the carrier Illustrious attacked the Italian fleet at Toronto. Wooden fins that broke upon impact with the sea allowed torpedoes to operate in shallow water. The attack received little public attention in the United States, but military experts took notice. All ships at anchor were now vulnerable to this kind of attack.
The Japanese had discovered in October of 41 a way to put vanes on their torpedoes which broke the fall in the water. And they'd outfitted their torpedoes with these breakaway vanes, and they were able to keep from diving at least 40 feet because Pearl Harbor was like 40 feet. And we think they only lost 1 or 2 torpedoes in the mud. So they were very, very successful with that attempt, because the torpedoes did a devastating job.
It wasn't so much a question of if, but a question of where. In the North Pacific, under strict radio silence, Japanese Vice Admiral Nagumo's fleet put to sea. It was a formidable task force: 6 aircraft carriers, 2 battleships, 3 cruisers, 9 destroyers, 3 submarines, and 8 tankers. U.S. military officials had been briefed on the worsening political climate. Admiral Kimmel dispatched a war warning to naval commanders. In response to Army General Short's Alert Number 1, planes were parked closely together to prevent sabotage. Aided by fog and stormy seas, the Japanese task force made its way undetected on its perilous 4,000-mile course. 12 days after departure, it reached its launching point 230 miles north of Oahu just before dawn on December 7, 1941. The crew readied themselves. The hour was at hand. Fluttered to life. Up fluttered the signal flags, then down again. Wing Commander Mitsuo Fuchida lifted off to lead the attack. One by one, the aircraft roared down the flight decks, drowning the cheers and yells that erupted everywhere. Plane after plane rose until the first wave of 183 were in the air. At 7:02 a.m., the radar station at Opana Point began plotting a large group of planes approaching from the north. The operators reported their findings to the information center, but were instructed not to worry about it. The blips were assumed to be a wing of recently commissioned B-17s, scheduled to arrive from the mainland. Sunday morning, the slowest time on base. Some men attended religious services, while others nursed hangovers or pampered themselves with a few extra hours of shut-eye. This vulnerability has long been recognized in military circles. In mock military exercises, U.S. war planners choose precisely this moment to strike. At 7:55 a.m., the devastating assault was unleashed. All that happened at the airfields was only a prelude to the carnage at Pearl Harbor. Inside that harbor were some 133 vessels of the Pacific Fleet, cruisers, destroyers, submarines, and 8 battleships, primary target of the Japanese strike force. Ship after ship received direct hits or crippling blows. Followed in support, but most of the damage had been done. In less than 2 hours, the U.S. military fortress had been disabled. The final toll was 2,403 servicemen and civilians dead, 1,178 wounded, 21 vessels, including 7 battleships, sunk or heavily damaged. Approximately 165 Army, Air Force, and Navy planes destroyed or unusable. The Tennessee and Maryland were hit by bombs. The West Virginia was sinking.
And as we went down below to go to our battle stations, and then found that we couldn't go any further because of the gushing water coming in, so as we tried to come back up, by this time they had closed the big watertight hatches, And in order for us to get back up, they left a little manhole, which is in the center of that hatch. It was we could only come up one at a time. And you were waiting there in line, really, to get back up, not knowing if your turn would ever get there before the ship actually sank.
The Oklahoma was hit by 9 torpedoes and capsized. The Arizona's death blow was from an armor-piercing delayed action bomb that exploded black powder in a forward magazine. She sank in less than 9 minutes with 1,500 crew members on board. Casualties numbered 1,177. Japanese losses included 29 planes and 55 airmen killed. 5 midget submarines with 9 crewmen killed and 1 captured, the first prisoner of war.
I have a statement here which the President has asked me to read. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor and all military activities at Oahu Island. A second air attack is reported on Manila air and naval bases.
Exploded onto the pages of American history. The announcement momentarily hushed the nation and the world. Japan's official document severing negotiations with the United States was to have been presented precisely at 1 p.m. However, it was not delivered until 2:20, approximately 1 hour after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Continuing their offensive, the Japanese quickly took the Philippines, Wake Island, Malaya, Hong Kong, and the Dutch East Indies.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory.
Rage and grief, America geared up for war. Volunteers reported to recruiting stations and were soon in uniform. This spirit of remembering Pearl Harbor was no better illustrated than at Pearl Harbor itself. All but 3 of the damaged ships, the Arizona, the Utah, and the Oklahoma, were repaired and returned to service. On June 3rd, 1942, Japanese warships and troop transports were sighted by American patrols. Several hundred miles out at sea, they were heading for the island of Midway. Under the command of Admiral Nimitz, commander of the Central Pacific Front, all available ships were committed to an attack. The American victory at Midway crippled Japan's air power, and the tides of war shifted. Germany fell in defeat on May 8th, and in August of 1945, the most devastating war in history was brought to a close with a new weapon, the most savage then known to man.
I have received this afternoon a message from the Japanese government in reply to the message forwarded to that government by the Secretary of State on August 11th. I deem this reply a full acceptance of the Potsdam Declaration, which specifies the unconditional surrender of Japan.
The war that began on a battleship in Pearl Harbor ended on a battleship in Tokyo Bay, the USS Missouri, September 2nd, 1945. Victory was not without an enormous price. It is fitting that the location of the National Cemetery in Pu'uhina, also known as Punch Bowl, the Hill of Sacrifice in old Hawaiian lore. It was November of 1941 when, in a chilling prophecy of what lay just ahead, Congress authorized the creation of the National Cemetery.
As promised, here is the address you may contact regarding obtaining your hour copy of the feature you just watched. It may also be available in DVD now.
To our non-Minnesota network of 19 states, if you and your friends want this series to continue, you must write your local Post chapter now. They need to know of your interest in continuing the series on your cable system. And that's the same for all members. Be sure to identify your executive board with Vets Visits so that we can continue to share with you in 2007. Now, for the board of directors and for Guy Hammernick, our engineer, and all the network cable systems, your county veteran service officers like Brad, agents and veterans posts and chapters in your community. Brad, are you ready?
All right.
Happy New Year. And we hope to be with you again in 2007. Check in, won't you? Take care. Thank you for joining us for this month's show. Seen in over 350 communities for over 3,500 half-hour periods. Our websites have additional information about the show and are updated bi-monthly. To contact us, you are welcome to use one of these electronic methods. For all ground mail with questions, suggestions for future programs, you may use this address. Our IRS nonprofit status is 501c3, Information Education. The Minnesota Commissioner of VA and these state-level organizations believe in and endorse Vets Visits. Join us next time, won't you, for Vets Visits on TV.